Zach, this is always the one that I think is the most interesting. I think it's the one that gets people riled up the most because I think, again, these are not rankings of the best coaches in the Big Ten.
No.
These are the power rankings for who we feel like is going to have the best chance to win the Big Ten Coach of the Year award. I put two of the coaches of bigger programs up at the top, like programs that have not historically not won the award, but they're good enough to win the Big Ten. And if they do win the Big Ten, they're probably going to win the award. And Dan Lanning and Sherron Moore, even though Michigan won a national championship last year, I think that Sherron Moore comes in, and if he wins the Big Ten, it's first year coach, all that buzz for him, and you get that there. Matt Rule has increased his win total. He won 5 games last year. His win total is at 7.5 this year. That is the largest increase of any team in the Big Ten. So he had a fantastic offseason. Kirk Cignetti, he's just been so fiery and so on people's minds. So he's going to be up there. Greg Schiano having a lot of hype, coming in as a dark horse, that kind of stuff. I also have Luke Fickell, Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley gets a little bit of the bump because I do think if a coach does well coming in from the West, I think that they're going to give them a little bit of love. But yeah, those are my top guys. Zach. Oh, I'm going to read Zach's really fast if you're on podcast. Sorry, I forgot to do that. Number 1 for Zach is Matt Rule, then Greg Schiano, Dan Lanning, Kirk Cignetti, Kirk Ferentz, David Braun, Sherron Moore, Ryan Day, James Franklin, Lincoln Riley, PJ Fleck, Jed Fish, Luke Fickell, Jonathan Smith, Ryan Walters, Deshaun Foster, Brett Bielema, Mike Loxley. My top 18 are number 1, Dan Lanning, Sherron Moore, Matt Rule, Kirk Cignetti, Greg Schiano, Lincoln Riley, Luke Fickell, Jonathan Smith, Kirk Ferentz, Brett Bielema, Ryan Walters, Mike Loxley, PJ Fleck, David Braun, Ryan Day, Deshaun Foster, Jed Fish, James Franklin. That's who I have last. Sorry, Penn State fans. Yeah, they would not be happy about that. Zach, talk about your list and some of the differences between my list and yours.
Yeah, I think my approach to this was like, how do I see a voter thinking about this, in November? And I think 2 coaches right off the bat, Matt Rule and Greg Schiano, the hype for them is real. But I think if they match the hype, it's going to feel like we were right. They were great. Let's award them. And I think Matt Rule and Greg Schiano really fit the bill there. I think Dan Lanning, I think if he goes 11-1, he is very much in the running as like on the short list. Like, just because he's new, I think to your point, Kirk Cignetti,
top 3 at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that honestly, those might, like, I have them as my top 3 for a reason. I think Kirk Cignetti, if he gets to 6-6, he's going to be a factor, like similar to Greg Schiano a year ago. Like, I think it's going to be hard to not think of him if Indiana gets to 6-6 because of where that program has been the past few years. I have Kirk Ferentz because for some reason, the history of this award, I feel like they should rename it to the Kirk Ferentz Big Ten Coach of the Year Award, because if he gets to 9-3, they give him the award. And so I just think historically that's been where he's been. So like, I think
and their win total is 8 this year, so he would technically be exceeding expectations.
Right. So like, I can see where they're tied for 3rd in the conference or something, and they're like, oh yeah, Kirk Ferentz should get the award. I think David Braun, Northwestern, as good
hard
as
to win it back to back, man. Hard to win it back to back.
It is. And my only thought in this is that I think if Northwestern gets to a bowl game again, I don't think people will look at David Braun and be like, oh, like he did that already. I think people know that like they might struggle with Miami of Ohio just from a roster standpoint. So like, I think they're going to see that as a, you've endured, you have all the stadium stuff going on. You've brought in a new staff. So I hear you. And I toyed with this. Here's probably maybe my more controversial part of my list. Sherron Moore, Ryan Day, James Franklin. I think Sherron Moore is going to have to be in the Big Ten championship game to win it. So I don't have him as high, but I think if he's in the Big Ten championship game, he probably is in the front, like at the top of the list. And we have Michigan in the Big Ten title game. So I'm like, all right, well, I think Ryan Day, if he's in the Big Ten title game and beats Michigan, I think the narrative might be different from years past with an Ohio State coach, because despite the fact that he's got the best roster, despite the fact that he has, all the pieces in place, he is the one who brought those pieces in place. He is the one who will finally have avenged his 3 losses to Michigan. So I could see where that logic goes awry, but I'm thinking that this might be the best way for an Ohio State coach to win the award. And I think Franklin, we don't have this, but if they go like 11-1 and their only losses to Ohio State, I think that really does help James Franklin. I think the schedule is manageable where if Franklin gets everything done, I think that he could win the award. So that's my top half. I think the bottom 9, I'll just say this real quick. I think it would be really hard because I think they might have really good seasons that will get overshadowed by other teams.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. PJ Fleck is definitely one of those guys that if they have a really good season, it's going to get overshadowed by somebody else or something else happening. Most likely, same thing with Deshaun Foss. Well, not really Deshaun Foss. I just don't think he's going to have a good season.
Yeah.
I don't think the chances are there very much. Same thing with Brett Bielema. Now, Ryan Walters has a good season. I think that, that'll really stand out. But Brian's comment here is exactly why I have Ryan Day down at 15th. He says, hard for a Buckeye coach to win the award. This award is all about who exceeds expectations the most. If you're expected to compete for a natty, it's hard. It's hard to exceed that. That's where I come with Ryan Day. Like, even if Ryan Day beats Michigan and then wins the Big Ten, which, like, those are the expectations. So
Right.
if Ryan Day comes in and does that, it's like, congrats, dude. You have the best roster. 2 Ohio State coaches said this offseason is the best roster that's ever been in Ohio State history. Good job. You met expectations. Now go win a national championship, right? Like, I look at it that way, and it's like, I do think that there's a bit of a story there where, like, if they come out and they just have like they dominate everybody and do everything super well. But, like, look at Purdue in college basketball. Like, Matt Painter's done that 2 years in a row, and he did tie for the award last year, but that was getting dicey on if he was going to win it at all. And it's like, it's because you've met expectations, Yeah. I do think that Ryan Day could be a tie after winning the conference. Like, I think he could tie with like a Matt Rule or like a Greg Schiano or something like that. But it's going to be really, really hard for him to win the award, even just like outright, because of the expectations and what's going on there.
Yeah, and I agree mostly. Like, I think for him to win the award, he'd probably have to go undefeated. I think the reason why I have him
and convincingly undefeated too.
Yeah, I think the reason why I have him above other guys though is I don't see a pathway for Jed Fish or Luke Fickell or Jonathan Smith. Fickell might maybe a little bit more, but even then, I'm like, I think it's going to be.
Yeah, like, let's go through and like try to figure out some of these guys. Like, what do they need to do to win Coach of the Year? If Luke Fickell comes out and wins 9 or 10 games, I think he definitely has a shot there. If they go out and they beat Penn State, they win some of these big games. If they beat Alabama, like, he's at the top of my power rankings if they beat Alabama, even though it's at home. Like, you do that, you take down the SEC giant, boom, you're at the top of the Big Ten coach power rankings. Do I think it's likely to happen? No, that's why I have him down at 7th. It can happen. I'm not picking it to happen. But if that does happen, he's going to shoot right up there. Jonathan Smith, even if they get like a 6 or 7 win season, I feel like that's going to be overshadowed by somebody else. But if he's the one doing that, coming off of the Mel Tucker stuff, and like Aiden Childs has a really good year, and like you could kind of see the path there a little bit. I think personally people are growing tired of Kirk Ferentz. I don't think Kirk Ferentz can win this award, even if they get 10 wins, because it's gonna be like, dude, your schedule is soft and
Yeah.
you won 10 games again, and you're going to go to the Big Ten championship game and get destroyed by another team that's really good. That it's going to be people kind of like, oh, here we go again. Iowa won the Big Ten championship, which is unfair. I think I think Kirk Ferentz is a better coach than that. But I think that'll be the narrative that's said. I'm not saying that's my narrative. I'm saying I think that will be the story or the narrative that will prevent him from winning the award.
That's a fair thought. I think so. I'll just go to Jonathan Smith. I just don't know how Michigan State's going to get even close to 6 wins, and I think that's
it would have to be the Aiden Childs show, man.
Yeah, that's true, and there's some optimism there. I feel like what we're proving is this is hard.
Yeah. Troy says Smith wins 8 to 7 games, and he's in the running. Yes. Yeah. It's just, is he likely to win 8? I think there's a path for other guys like PJ Fleck and David Braun. I don't necessarily think there's a path. Like if David Braun wins 7 games again, it's like cool. Like, yeah, your win total was really low, but you did that last year.
I would push back on that because I think Northwestern's schedule, like they're not in the West anymore. It's not a daunting schedule, but it's harder than a year ago. And
it's not a Big Ten West schedule.
Yeah, like I don't have the thing in front of me, but if they get a key upset or two, like I do think I think there's more of a pathway for Braun. Certainly more for Braun than Fleck.
Yeah, I mean they're both right there together, so I could go either way on that. Yeah. All right, I'm trying to look. Brian's talking about he doesn't want Kirk Ferentz to win the winningest head coach award, which I don't know. Like I look more at winning percentage than like most wins personally. Yeah. I know that's probably homerism in me because Michigan has the most wins in college football, but Ohio State has the best winning percentage. So there's probably some homerism there. At least I recognize my homerism, right?
Amen.
I mean,
Amen.
Yeah.
There you go.
So Troy says Northwestern wins 8 games again. That coach wins it. It's the surprise team that wins. They weren't predicted to that win. Yeah, their win total is 4.5 right now. I don't know. Like, it's really hard for me to see guys win the award back to back. Paul Chris did it in 2016, 2017. He tied in 2016, and then he won it outright in 2017. But he also did that winning 11 games and then winning 13 games. So he improved his win total by 2 wins that year in order to do that. So I don't know. Like it's all about the perception of David Braun, I guess, with what he's done and what he can do. I think everybody's just got a different opinion on it, and maybe it's just a different opinion than me.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Let's talk about the top really fast, Zach. So we talked about what Dan Lanning and Sherron Moore had to do for mine. Let's talk about what does Matt Rule and Greg Schiano have to do. I think if Matt Rule wins 8 or 9 games, lock.
Yep.
Even if Dan Lanning wins the conference, I think Matt Rule is at least tying with Dan Lanning.
Yeah, and that was in my calculus. Is I think Nebraska will go 9-3, and I think if they go 9-3, Matt Rule wins.
Yeah, I think they will too, but I get burned every time I believe in Nebraska's.
Well, but I mean, I think and this is the thing. This is the first time and maybe I don't mean this to toot my own horn. Now I'm being arrogant. Darn it. Goes full circle. This is the first time where I feel like there's substance to the turnaround. Like before it was like, well, Scott Frost is the favored son. It's like, yeah, but like, what is he actually doing? Like he hasn't done anything. I feel like there's a lot more substance to Rule than there ever was with Scott Frost. So that's but yeah, I think 9-3 gets Matt Rule the award. My only caveat is the Rutgers 10-win special. Because if
What,
that,
you think if Rutgers wins 10 games and Nebraska wins 9 games, you think Schiano wins it outright?
I think it's very possible.
I think they tie if that happens.
Maybe. I,
I
I
don't think I don't think Nebraska has not been to a bowl game for 7 years. If you take Nebraska from 5-7 to 9 and what would that be 9-3, I can't see how he doesn't even get a tie for it.
yeah,
Like they
that's
they, they might
fair.
for the first time ever do a 3-way tie if Greg Schiano gets 10 wins, Matt Rule gets 9 wins, and Dan Lanning wins the conference. 3-way tie. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
would probably be what happens before Matt Rule gets booted out for somebody else.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I think it's but I so the reason why I have Matt Rule first though is I think 9-3 Matt Rule is more likely than a 10-win Rutgers and an Oregon winning the conference.
See, that's where I disagreed. I thought a Oregon winning the conference was more likely than Matt Rule going 9-3. I think it can happen. We picked him to go 9-3,
Yeah.
so obviously
You're
I think it
going
can happen.
against our picks.
Oh, they were our picks. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then I look at it and I'm like, look, if Sherron Moore goes, even if Sherron Moore goes 10-2, if Sherron Moore goes 10-2 and beats Ryan Day,
That's
he's winning
different.
it.
Yeah, that's different than 10-2 and not beating Ryan Day.
Yeah,
But
if he goes 10-2 and doesn't beat Ryan Day, no, he's not winning it. But if Sherron, like for a little bit of Sherron Moore, like he goes 10-2 and beats Ryan Day, he has a little bit of that advantage there where it's like you beat your main rival again, even after all these allegations and everything else or whatever. You did all that stuff. So that was my thought process of
Yeah.
having him that high is like just do what you're supposed to do and then win the game that nobody really has you winning right now, even though you've won it the past 3 years.
Yeah.
The
thought of that
kind of stuff.
happening, my heart's breaking right now.
Yeah.
It's just
And then my other thought was Kirk Cignetti. Like if Kirk Cignetti gets 7 wins, I think he's at least gonna tie.
yeah. Yeah. As out of all the rankings, the only two that we matched on was Cignetti and Deshaun Foster.
I think Deshaun Foster was a pretty easy one to
Yeah.
put down at the bottom 3.
Yeah.
It's that ultimate combination of like probably not gonna get it, and we think we know what you're gonna be this season. Like at least with David Braun, it's like he might not only win 4 or 5 games because of what he did last year. But with Deshaun Foster, it's like, listen, we like you, but did you see the speech? Like,
yeah.
that kind of, and I know UCLA, like I'm wearing a UCLA shirt, so UCLA fans, I'm not a hater, but I'm just being real and being honest.
Man, forget the speech. Look at the schedule. Oh,
well, yeah, and that too. That too. All right. Anybody else that we haven't hit on here? Lincoln Riley, you're lower on him than I am. I think if Lincoln Riley wins 9 games with that schedule, LSU, Notre Dame, like, yeah, it's not all conference stuff, but I think if he wins 9 games, he's in the conversation. I think he needs a little bit of luck to swing his way, but if they go 9-3, 10-2, I don't think it's likely to happen, but if it happens, I think he's in the conversation.
I think he's got to get to at least 10.
At least 10.
Yeah, because part of it is, you were saying expectations, and that's what's keeping Ryan Day and probably even James Franklin low. I think it's similar with Lincoln Riley. Like, I think people expect more out of Lincoln Riley, and I don't think it's enough. Maybe this is personally just me. I don't know if it's enough for him to go 10-2 when he went 7-5 with the Heisman winner last year. So,
well, and I think like if Miller Moss has a spectacular season and Lincoln Riley is getting all the hate that he's getting this offseason, which, I'm not saying isn't deserved, but, he's getting all that hate. And you throw Miller Moss out there and he is a Heisman finalist and he's won Big Ten Player of the Year. Like, it's almost like, yeah, this guy is, he is who we thought he was years ago. Like his perception's not gotten worse. And so, yeah, 10 wins is probably more likely, but I just look at that schedule and think, well, maybe 9. But
yeah,
But yeah, Troy was a big fan of the speech. He says his Big Ten speech, being a Sean Foster, was awesome. I learned UCLA and USC were in Southern California. I never would have known that. Man,
They're,
Troy, I am so glad you learned something new.
they're in LA.
Yeah, LA, Southern California. There you go. They're in the names. Well, yeah, Southern California is in one name, LA is in the other name. So,
How over under on how many times we will make that joke this season?
oh, so many times. So many times. It's like, guys, did you know UCLA played this weekend in LA? Guys, they didn't play in LA this weekend. They played somewhere else, but they are going back to LA. Don't worry.
There you go.
They're gonna play in LA.
I kind of want to visit LA, but
for a game, I hear
Yeah.
there's a ton of seats. You might not even have to buy a ticket.
oh yeah, the
You can
flight,
just sneak in after the second quarter.
man, that's the thing. That's the killer.
Yeah. All right, let's stay on task here, Zach.
Right.
Any other coaches we haven't really? I guess we touched on Greg Schiano. We didn't really. I mean, we said win total of 9 or 10. I mean, I just think like Greg Schiano was getting love last year for winning 6 games for Big Ten Coach of the Year. Like I know he has a little bit of he has a much more schedule this year, so obviously they're not going to have like season defining wins. But they didn't really have season defining wins last year that got them to 6-6 and gave him kind of that extra oomph to get up there. So I mean, is 9 wins what they need, or could 8 wins do it, or 7 wins do it?
I think they've got to get 9, especially if Nebraska gets 9. I think one thing that could put them over the top are wins over Nebraska or a win at Virginia Tech, especially if Virginia Tech ends up being good in the ACC.
Yeah, like an ACC contender.
Yeah, and then USC. Like they go to USC. If they upset USC, that might be.
You're right. That would be a kind of like a season defining win that like little old Rutgers went all the way out or they go to LA, right?
Yep. The Coliseum.
Yeah. They went all the way to LA and they took down the blue blood in USC after USC was talking all this stuff about them being a blue blood and everything going into the season, and little old Rutgers that could went in and did that. Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's a great point.
Yep. Common guy goes for 250 on him.
You know what? He's winning Big Ten Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year if he goes 250 as well. Maybe not against USC. If he does against Iowa, sure. Yeah. So I think if they win 9, he has it for sure. I think if they win 8, it's likely that he'll tie, but they need help.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah.
I think that's good.
Yeah. All right, Zach, any other thoughts on coaches before we end the episode here?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. Like I think the guys that we covered, the guys that we didn't cover, I think it's just I don't know if there's a pathway to get there. So
yeah, no, I agree.